Oh yeah, this is an interesting one. This is a weird one. I wasn't expecting to see this, chat. So Kamala Harris reportedly shaken after watching conservative news. Quote, it got in her head and caused high anxiety. Chat, I never thought I would say this. Is Kamala Harris our girl? Hiding her power level? No, I don't think she is, Matthias. No, not even slightly. But this is interesting because, like, Kamala Harris, I had always thought of her as just a generic psychopath. And maybe I shouldn't be so bland with these assessments, but the psychopathic mindset abides only the things that benefit itself in the short term, usually. And so I don't think most psychopaths actually care about politics, except to the extent that it directly benefits them. So I don't know how she would even be swayed this way. But you take any given individual, they're not going to be 100% psychopath. Maybe in some cases they are, but not 100%. So they may believe in some things a little bit. Maybe Kamala Harris, genuine, I don't know. It might be that that she believes that a lot of her opinions are flowing from truth, even though she probably knows a lot of them aren't, but that they're not flowing from truth, and that the conservative news reports on truth that is different than what she thought. Maybe it is in fact true. Either way, let's continue. It says she's publicly trying to be a victim. She's still a sociopath. Maybe. And maybe I'm just judging this from the title here, but what I like to do is take the title and just respond to that, because it's usually an exaggerated version of reality. And if we can handle and explain an exaggerated version of reality, we can also explain the non-exaggerated version. Now that we've responded to the title itself, let's read a bit more of the article, because it might be quite different than what we expect. There is a video here, but I'm not sure if it's directly the right thing. We'll come back to it. In one of the most infamous misquotes of all time, Aristotle's supposed assertion that it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. I don't know what they're trying to prove there with that first paragraph. I think I read it wrong as well. Doesn't matter. One blogger notes that the misquote appears to have first surfaced in Lowell Benion's 1959 book, Religion and the Pursuit of Truth, and that he can only assume it is a rather radical paraphrase of the actual sentence that appears in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. I don't know how to read that. Nevertheless, the thought itself, even if it is a radical paraphrase and doesn't capture Aristotle's real meaning, is not a bad one. It's certainly a heck of a better sentiment than the anonymous quote about what happened to Vice President Kamala Harris when she was exposed to media where she wasn't portrayed in a favorable light. It got in her head and caused high anxiety. The word anxiety does imply to me that, yes, she is going for the victim angle, Calidrius. You may be right about that. That quote comes from an Axios article published Friday titled Inside Biden's Obsession with Morning Joe. Apparently, the president just can't get enough of MSNBC weekday morning show that generally praises his administration and the Democrats so effusively, Biden literally couldn't do a better job if he were doing it himself. If that's really what they're saying, if he's really obsessed with a show which just promotes his greatness, that is such a clear-cut case of an information corruption where this is amazing. Our opponent have been trying to do this to us from the outside for years. They've been trying to do this to us from the outside for years, trying to show us only information which will convince us to act in a way that benefits them. Now, in those cases, they've been trying to show us Democrat sources, which may have just pissed off Republicans even more because they still disagree with them. But it's even worse when you do it to yourself and all you've got are yes men. That's the mechanism that's happening here. This is the yes men mechanism. And it's such a good example, such a good indicator of a regime that's about to collapse. If you do not have a reliable information flow coming in, then you cannot act in the interest of the truth, or even in the interest of your own benefit, because all you're hearing is confirmatory nonsense and sucking up. This is a large part of the reason that Chernobyl happened, because any bad news was viewed as a failure, and so they couldn't report bad news back to the center, and so they could only report good news. So they started lying, which has just led to an entire nation of yes men. If that's really what Biden and his people are doing, well, I guess we could probably have assumed that they were doing it the whole time. But yeah, anyway, let's continue. The article goes on, and I don't mean that it's that as in figuratively but in bolded italics, literally, but literally, considering this is what happens when America's leader tries to sing his own praises.
The beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes. I wonder why it's called.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Thanks, Biden. Very informative. Here's the video if you want it, chat. What he said, 4 more years, 4 more years, 4 more beers, says the Gateway Pundit. For a media that's so often fretted about the media diet of former President Donald Trump, the Axios report should raise more alarms about what the current occupant of the White House and his backup are watching. Biden's years-long love of MSNBC's staple morning show affects how the White House runs and who Biden listens to, Axios reported. The president often calls co-host Joe Scarborough, a former Republican congressman who's now a harsh critic of Donald Trump, to get Scarborough's take on issues and sometimes vent about media coverage, according to people familiar with the relationship. During the day, Biden has long asked his staff whether they saw a story, a poll, or a segment that had been on the show. He's included both show regulars in off-the-record conversations with policy experts. Because there's nobody who I think should be setting policy like Morning Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, and their merry troop of regular guests, says Gateway Pundit. Other show regulars mentioned as being in on foreign policy discussions include journalist Mike Barnicle, former Council on Foreign Relations President Richard Haas, and anti-Trump historian Joe Meacham, who once said after a 2020 presidential debate that support for the now former president proved there is a lizard brain in this country, whatever the heck that means. No, Trump does not have a lizard brain. In other words, the White House is now he has like I think what he has is a mammal brain, not like a human brain, but his strongest suit is his mammal brain. He doesn't use reason and rationality for most of his decisions. I think it's highly advanced instinct, but it's good guy instinct. The lizard brain is bad guy instinct for self-benefit. Trump is self-aggrandizing, he's self-promoting, but he does actually care about good things. Let's skip to the bit about Kamala, shall we? And yet, that's somehow not the most worrying part of the Axios report. Kamala, it was also reported, is an ardent Morning Joe fan. Natch, and hosted a dinner for the married co-host couple last month at the vice presidential residence. But she also goes to different parts of the cable dial. And when she ventures from the safe confines of MSNBC and its fawning coverage, she doesn't like what she comes across. No, not like a rat. Rats are they? No, they're not marsupials, are they? No, they're not. They are mammals, but they're not the kind of mammal I mean. What I mean is to exclude the human rational mind, the simulating mind, which I'm sure Trump does. It's just not his strongest suit. Aides have noted that Harris also tunes into Fox News and occasionally watches The Five. No idea what that is. Axios reported, some aides have felt that Fox News' relentless negative coverage, that first casting her as Biden's all-powerful puppeteer, then later portraying her as incompetent, can drive Harris to distraction. That's very interesting. If that's true, it's very interesting. It got in her head and caused high anxiety because they were constantly hammering her, a former aide to Harris said. In other words, Kamala Harris is one heartbeat away from the presidency in an administration where that heart has beat for 81 years, and if it's as steady as the brain that regulates it, might not be the most reliable part in the bin, they say. Yeah, that's interesting. Keep watching Kamala. Yeah, yeah, indeed, Meat Bun. Kamala, maybe you can be... It wouldn't be amazing if Kamala was the person in who, like, from within the regime who said, okay, that's enough. Fox News has convinced me. And I've spent the last 6 hours watching Russell Brand. It's time to put a stop to this show. What was I? Yeah. Yet, when she comes across The Five, which is mostly a comedy show with jocular, if mostly conservative takes on the day's news, she apparently gets herself in such a state where a Valium might be in order. Interesting. Axios' Alex Thompson, somewhat unbelievably, just moved the heck on from this, noting yet more love from both President and VP toward Morning Joe. President Biden also likes Fareed Zakaria GPS on CNN2. There's a scoop for you. I don't know what that is. That's probably it for Kamala, though. There's more here about some other things. Is Kamala Harris...
So you're right. We have a lot of accomplishments. And I think what the American people want most in their leaders is that we actually get things done. And we have done it. We haven't taken adequate credit for it, frankly. And we got to do a better job of getting the word out about what we have accomplished and who did it.
Not sure I believe her, chat. What do you think? I'm not entirely sure I believe her there. That she's done lots of things and just hasn't adequately received credit for it. Now, maybe what she means is that she's done a lot of things that she's not sure the American people would actually like, and hasn't told them about it. Anyway, that is it for that article. There is more, but I don't think it's about the main reason we were reading it. But yeah, that is interesting though. Now again, maybe they released that piece of information that Kamala watches that stuff and gets what I think is quite clearly cognitive dissonance. Maybe they released that for some reason, some greater purpose, some strategy to release that information. But it's also plausible as long as Kamala Harris is not a total psychopath, which, to be fair, I had always assumed she probably was. Perhaps she isn't. Mark Knife says Fox the Five are smooth-brained Lefty and rhinos. If any of them make a base take, they always cut to commercials. Interesting. Well, maybe that, to Kamala Harris, perhaps that's still a region of totally unknown information, which has more value in truth than her own information does. Whereas normally this would make me want to watch the show. Yeah. But I mean, it described anxiety from it. If you were a normie, but you liked the truth, then maybe it would. But if you're a normie who just likes living a normal life, then maybe you wouldn't. Ginger says, I have found that normies, especially young ones, are incapable of tuning out information that causes them distress. It's like they unconsciously force themselves to suffer, listening to information they don't want to hear and don't believe just because they want to suffer. Interesting. It may be that humans, I think a lot of humans are drawn towards the unfamiliar information, yes, but also like truth. I think one of the symptoms of autism, or one of the traits of an autistic person, is an addiction to the truth, which normies don't have and psychopaths don't have. And I think most of us here have it. That's why we're here. So they would be drawn towards it. But I think the average normie isn't. The average normie is more concerned with celebrity gossip than they are with truth. People who are, and I think a trait of ADHD, or trait of ADHD people, is the ability to change your opinions much more easily, much more plastically than other people can, and the willingness to do so. I think I have both of these traits. Most of you probably have both of these traits. And I think it's these two traits, which I think usually correlate with an intent to do good rather than an intent to do evil, or at least neutrality. These traits sign out the people in a society who dissent against an evil regime. So yeah, it may be, Ginger, that the examples you've seen there do all have the trait of a magnetism towards the truth. Malcatillo, that's a less optimistic interpretation. I don't think so. I think we're not quite at the point yet where you can say, I heard someone else's opinion, I'm a victim. Maybe, though. I don't know. Maybe, though. Maybe there's something to that, Malcatillo. Maybe a society that encourages victimhood gets people to start liking suffering, because in a Pavlovian way. But what that leads to is that they will start to dislike the decadent and indolent lifestyle, which is encouraged usually by dictatorships, such that they start suffering in ways that are actually beneficial to them rather than going after victimhood. But there's some contradictions there. I'm not sure if that really makes sense. Less good or bad and more each one's blend of order and chaos. Well, I think that most people are good by nature. Most people want to do good. And then there is a small cadre of people, maybe 5%, who want self-interest above any sort of ethical consideration. And those are psychopaths. Maybe less than 5%, actually, but we know that it's at least 1%. The psychopaths, there's enough of them that they can fill out every position in a government, unfortunately, easily, and in every major organization. When that happens, you are in the shit. And that has happened today. But most people, 95% probably at least, either don't care much about ethics, They're fairly neutral, or they would prefer to do good if push comes to shove, but then they're not too bothered about it. Or I think most of them actually want to do good. Probably at least half the public genuinely want to do good, would be resistant to doing something in their self-interest if they thought it was evil. Probably much more than 50%, actually. The vast majority, either way, are generally good people. And I think that the adherence to the truth and the willingness to be changeable in your opinions, they don't correlate with evil directly, which means that they are more likely to correlate with good because most people are good. Yeah. I think it doesn't strongly correlate with either, and so it's usually found among people that are good. Yeah, Puma, the problem is that a lot of the people that don't care a lot about ethics can have their ethical sense disrupted and overruled by propaganda or force or coercion. So a lot of people that do bad things wouldn't prefer to or don't know they're bad, even if the person themselves is good, which is why I'm always careful of this kind of stuff in the culture war.